Well, folks, welcome to the channel and welcome to another episode. Today, we have one tank of a knife that we're going to be looking at. We're looking here today at the First Edge 50/50 survival knife. And for those of you who are in the market and looking for a really thick, stout, but compact fixed blade that you could either put probably in your bug out bags, maybe you are in the military and you're looking for something that's just super stout, super durable, and has a premium stainless steel with it, that's what I think you're gonna gravitate to, and those are the people who are really gonna enjoy seeing what this knife has to offer. Because this is one overbuilt knife, and on purpose, because First Edge was contracted by the US Navy SEALs, I guess they're Kodiak teams, which are the teams that operate like in cold weather environments, to build this knife. So there's a lot of thought that went into this. Now, I'm not in the Kodiak teams. I don't have a need for that. And when someone stamps, you know, bam, Navy SEALs on there, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to like the knife and, you know, oh, I subscribe to that. Now, obviously, it works for those teams. That's what they had it built for. So we're going to look today more in either an urban setting. I'm going to do some work around the home, just prying on stuff, cutting stuff, but also out here in the wilderness. Could this be just a really compact, super stout survival knife for particularly those of you who don't want high carbon and you're looking for the stainless steel? So that's what we're going to be seeing today with the 50/50 survival knife from First Edge. So with that, let's get to it. All right, so as we dive into this, because this is a brand new knife, we'll go through some of the basic specs for you. Now, the knife itself weighs in at 17 ounces, so a hair over a pound. Total weight with the sheath is going to be 23 ounces, so a lot of weight, so take that in consideration when you are deciding on this knife. When we're looking at the blade from tip to the handle, we're looking at 5.3 inches with an actual cutting edge right here at the grind of 5 inches even. It is a full tank construction, G10 handle scales on either side, and you're looking at a thickness here on the spine of 0.23, so just a hair under a 1/4 inch thick, and it does have a 90-degree spine that will throw some sparks with a good durable black coating. And then again, LMAX steel, I believe it's 61 to 62 if I remember correctly, on the Rockwell. So that is what we are looking at today when we are going to dive into the ins and outs of this knife. Now let's go ahead and discuss the actual blade and its performance, and I'm going to be running a lot of footage as we discuss this. Now this does have a saber grind, and it's got that real kind of, it reminds me of like a 45 cal snub nose kind of blade, so it's going to be very, very tough and very, very durable. That's what it's designed for. This isn't really designed as a hand-to-hand combat knife. It's super heavy and kind of snub nose, so you will get a little bit of stabbing capability, but not much. So this would be much more of just that really compact kind of field survival knife, I guess, if you will, and really for people that are looking to have a huge amount of durability but in a really compact package, particularly again going to the Navy SEALs, military people who maybe don't have a lot of space on your rig and on your LBE, but you want that durability. That's what this is kind of designed for. Now the LMAX steel is that stainless steel, great edge retention, fantastic edge retention, and this came ridiculously shaving sharp out of the box. I was really surprised. I've had other LMAX that was kind of coarse and didn't have quite the fine edge that I like on my knives, and this thing was ridiculously sharp out of the box and is maintaining its edge fantastically well. Now, the downside to LMAX would be the field sharpening capability. If you're out there in the field for weeks on end, you got to have a really good system for sharpening your blades. You're not going to be able to sharpen this on a rock or just like a little pocket stone without a lot of work. So just take that into consideration. When this does dull, you are going to have to take some time to put that fine edge back on that. So that is a pro and a con to the LMAX steel. Now, some people may complain about LMAX and its lateral strength, the side to side. So I wanted to make sure, you know, with this knife, could this handle a lot of side to side abuse, splitting, stabbing, prying, to make sure that the tip wasn't going to snap off, or, you know, that there weren't going to have any lateral problems, and I didn't see any. This is an extremely tough knife, and, you know, you hear the term a lot, and I would say that it absolutely applies to this, that this would be like a sharpened pry bar in its strength and durability. So that is something to note and something to consider when when you are looking at this knife. You know, for a huge honking brick of a blade, it actually was able to do the finer work rather well. Now, obviously, thinner blades that weigh less are going to do a lot better at the finer tasks. This is not a bushcraft knife, you know, or even I would say really a camp knife. This is just a true down and dirty, hard use survival knife that's just in a really compact package, and that's really where it fits in. It fits well. You know, it can cut through, again, not only the woods aspect of it, but other just man-made materials of any kind, nylon rope, cordage, rubber. We did rubber cutting, and just things like that, again, with that really nice fine edge and holding up very well, not chipping, not rolling, with all of the ridiculous abuse. I put this through more abuse than most of my other knives that I would test out, purely because of the claims that it's a, you know, a Navy SEAL, you know, backed knife, if you will. And again, I mean, that just because somebody says that, or even because it was issued to them, doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to fit into your needs. You know, you got to decide if it's going to fit in your needs, and that's what I was doing with this, is deciding, is this going to fit in my needs? But the durability is there, as well as the edge retention and toughness on this knife. Now, as we said, this is a full tank construction. These are G10 handle scales with coarse traction on the sides. Think of like your older style cold steel, like Recon or Mini Recon G10, very, you know, heavy traction there. The edges are all rounded, but it is blocky. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. 6 inches from handle, from front to back, 6 inches long, and that is because of wanting to go with a cold weather environment, which was what it was designed for. So if you have really thick, heavy gloves on, you're still able to get your hand around the knife. So that is something to note, something to consider. And they just did a natural, you know, straight off the back design, which is great. There's nothing really, you know, to complain about that. Again, being more of a soldier knife, it doesn't have a big hook for chopping, you know, so that is something to note as well. The maximum thickness on the handle scales are 0.75 inches thick overall. And then you are going to get this really you know, aggressive glass breaker back here with this lanyard hole as well. So that glass breaker is designed obviously to break through, you know, that type of material, crush things, that type of stuff, not hammer in tent pegs. Again, not really an outdoor knife. So I want to take a brief moment and roll in the BK2, because if you are looking at this knife and checking out the 50/50, you're thinking in your mind of two really well-known, well-established knives, the BK2 and the SE5. Now, I don't have the SE5 on me. That's in my brother's collection. But this is the 50/50 is much more along the lines of the SE, but I wanted to talk about how it would compare in the application compared to a BK2. Because obviously these knives share very similar thicknesses, grind angles, and just overall design. But the one main thing I wanted to touch on first off is just the steels, the LMAX versus the 1095 that an SE5 or this BK2 is made out of. Now, the two things that are the big, huge positive is that obviously the edge retention and the rust resistance, whereas you won't get the same edge retention or rust resistance on a high carbon steel knife that you see on the LMAX. So that would be the first thing to consider. But for myself, I don't live in a very high humid environment, so that doesn't really affect my 1095 blades. But if you do live in that high humid environment, the knife begins to, the LMAX steel becomes very attractive to you. The other aspect is the handle. This is very combat style-esque of like an SE5, kind of blocky, whereas the handle on the BK2 is going to be a lot more rounded and a lot more ergonomic. The other thing you'll notice is the pommel is more of a glass breaker versus the squared off, again being more for combat breaking glass, this being more for out in the woods pommeling tent stakes and pegs and things like that. Then finally, not really any hook off the back, where there is a pronounced Becker hook off the back of the BK2 allowing you to chop. So that's really where I believe a Becker BK2, as long as you don't mind the humidity aspect of it, is actually going to be a better woods knife for you if you are looking for this really stout, smaller, compact knife than, say, this knife, the 50/50, or say like an SE5. These are much more styled as survival/combat knives. So that's where they're going to fit into play. They're not going to be quite as ergonomic, but they're going to give you certain features that would be better applied in either survival/combat situation versus more of a camping, hunting, woods application of the BK2. So just keep that in consideration when you are deciding whether or not the 50/50 is going to be a good knife for you. Are you going to be using this more as like a bug out bag, survival knife, combat knife, or are you going to be using it more at, are you looking for something that's more of an out in the woods wilderness knife? That will determine which one is going to be better for you when you're deciding on the design. Now the sheath on this knife is really well designed. There's actually something that kind of stands out from the crowd, but we'll just look at the basic aspects of it first. What we have is a nylon button snap up here near the handle, just kind of helps secure it. You got a very large piece of webbing that's going to fit on combat belts and is really well attached and screwed into the Kydex sheath. You do have a good thumb ramp so that it's very easy for you to push off and deploy the blade with, I believe, about 15 pounds of pressure. And then even if you decide to take that nylon strap off, it's still going to be nice and secure in there with some slight rattle, but it's nice and secure, so you could carry that upside down if you desire, and then give yourself a good push and pull off. It does also come with a good drainage hole for those of you in humid or wet and rainy conditions. Now, the one thing that really sets this Kydex apart is that when the Navy SEAL, I think it was the Kodiak teams, were asking First Edge to produce this knife, they said, listen, Kydex is cracking on us in these sub-zero temperatures, and if you know anything about Kydex and you live in sub-zero temperatures, Kydex is not necessarily the best material, but the military wanted that level of quality and durability that Kydex offers without the cracking under those frigid temperatures. So they went to the drawing board, and after a year of testing up there with those teams, I guess, they came up just kind of with a system. You can kind of look a little bit more into it, but from what I understand, there's a steel ring through here, and then the two pieces of Kydex are screwed in. There's kind of a lip right here that allows for flexing so that it's not going to crack under the sub-zero frigid temperatures, which is nice to see. So if you are in an environment where cold is a factor and you are concerned about the molded Kydex cracking on you, from all of their testing and all the things that were expected out of this knife, it has produced that well. For me, I live in the Rockies. I've never had you know, it gets low, and we've been out here in, you know, like 0-degree weather before, but never had a problem with my Kydex. But just for those of you who are really interested in that, that is a factor that they emphasize and it was in the design requirements of this sheath. Now, how about the price point on this knife? It's going to be a pretty penny because of the LMAX, because of the fit and finish, and because of the R&D that went into some of the items, particularly the sheath, that they had to do to build this knife. Now, LMAX is a very expensive steel when you're buying it and then you're properly heat treating it. So this is going to go for $315. $315. We'll have links to Amazon below so that if you are interested in this knife, that's where I found some of the best prices are. And if you use those hyperlinks, that's always a great way to help support the channel. So when you are deciding on this knife, you're going to really have to think through, okay, is this the right knife for my systems at that price point? For the materials, for the fit and finish, everything like that, that's relatively reasonable. I would say maybe if this was more around like $275, that would have been a little bit, you know, just easier on the pocketbook. Over $300, you know, I get it because of the steel, but that is something that you're really going to have to weigh at that price point if this is going to fit inside one of your systems. Well, folks, it's time for us to bring this video to a close. Just kind of wrap up my final thoughts on this knife. You know, who do I think this is good for? Where does it fit into a system? Because that's what we got to think about, systems. What is this applicable to be put into? So obviously, first off, if you are in the military and you work in cold weather environments and you're deployed there, this is what that's designed for, and this may absolutely be something that you need and are looking for. Or if you're an outdoorsman and like the SE5 and BK2 really connect with you, but you're looking for something that doesn't rust as easily and you're looking for something maybe that is gonna handle a better edge for a longer period of time, well then this would absolutely fit that bill and is basically just a souped up SE5 as we've kind of discussed in the video. And finally, for those of you maybe building a bug out bag and you are wanting something that's really super stout, but that isn't going to take up a lot of room on your bag or in your bag, then that's where this, I believe, knife fits into a system. Now, for me personally, I would heavily consider putting this in one of my bug out bags. Just kind of depends on if it's going to fit the needs for me exactly, but that's where I see, for me personally, it fitting into a system. For me, I don't usually use this size a knife with this much weight in either hiking expeditions or around my campsite. If I'm going to dedicate this much weight of 17 ounces plus the sheath and everything else, to a system, I want it to be a lot longer so I can span more wood and get a little better chopping done. But that's for me as an outdoorsman. So just keep that into consideration on how you're planning on deploying this knife and whether or not it's going to fit inside your systems. But when it comes to materials, quality, fit and finish, First Edge has really done a great job and kind of been innovative as well with that Kydex that, according to everything, you know, that is said, and obviously the Navy SEALs are happy with, cold weather deployment, and it doesn't crack. So that's big positive. Ultimately, guys, I really hope that this video has helped you out in deciding whether or not the First Edge 50/50 survival knife is going to be a good knife to put into one of your systems. As always, check us out on all the relevant social media. Links are in the description below. Please subscribe, comment, like, share this video. And as always, remember, stay equipped, stay prepared. We'll see you out there.